The vastness of space had always belonged to the Vorn. For 10,000 years, their mighty warships had crossed the galaxy, bringing countless civilizations under their rule. No species had ever successfully resisted them. Their tall, muscular bodies were naturally armored with metallic scales, and their minds were coldly logical. The Vorn considered themselves the pinnacle of evolution, destined to rule all they surveyed. Admiral Drex stood on the command deck of the Dominion, his flagship that stretched nearly 5 miles from bow to stern. His silver scales gleamed under the dim blue lights as he studied the star charts. He had conquered 17 species in his long career, earning him the respect of the High Council and the fear of everyone else. "Admiral, we have completed our scan of Sector 87, reported Officer Kell, his second in command. It contains 32 habitable planets, with 8 showing signs of primitive technology. Drex nodded slowly. Another routine conquest awaited. The Vorn always followed the same pattern. Identify planets with resources, assess any native life forms, and either subjugate or eliminate them based on their usefulness. It was efficient, logical, and had worked flawlessly for millennia. "Prepare the fleet for systematic expansion," Drex ordered. "Begin with the outer systems, and work inward." The massive fleet of 500 warships moved with perfect coordination. Each vessel was crewed by Vorn who had trained their entire lives for conquest. They believed absolutely in their superiority and right to rule. 3 days into the operation, a science vessel at the edge of the fleet sent an unexpected report. Officer Kell brought it immediately to Drex's attention. "Admiral, the Seeker has detected unusual transmissions from a solar system near the center of this sector. The signal shows surprising complexity for a Level 2 civilization." Drex frowned. The Vorn classified all species on a scale of 1 to 10. A Level 2 would have just discovered radio communications and basic spaceflight, hardly worth special notice. "Show me," he commanded. The screen filled with data streams and signal patterns. Most were simple broadcasts, entertainment, news, and communications, but mixed among them were encrypted military transmissions and complex scientific data exchanges. "These patterns suggest they may be closer to Level 3, Drex observed. "Still not a concern, but worth monitoring." The science officer looked troubled. "There's more, Admiral. The signals contain discussions of theoretical physics that suggest they're developing faster than light travel concepts on their own." This was unusual. Most species required Vorn technology to advance beyond their solar system. Any race developing FTL theory independently showed dangerous potential. "Send a scout ship," Drex ordered. "Full stealth protocol. I want detailed information about this species before we proceed." 5 days later, the scout ship returned. Its commander looked unsettled as he reported to Drex. "Admiral, we observed their homeworld from orbit. They call themselves humans. They are physically unremarkable. No natural armor. Average strength. Limited lifespan of less than a century. But their technological advancement rate is unlike anything in our records." Drex listened as the report continued. The humans had gone from primitive flight to space exploration in less than a century. Their global information network contained knowledge freely available to their entire species. They fought wars among themselves constantly, driving rapid weapons development. Most concerning, the scout commander concluded, is their adaptability. They live in environments ranging from frozen wastelands to burning deserts. They create technology to overcome their physical limitations rather than accepting natural boundaries. Later that day, Drex presented these findings to the High Council through a secure transmission. The 7 ancient Vorn who ruled their empire listened impassively. "Your concern is noted, Admiral," the council leader replied when Drex finished. "But we have faced thousands of species, and none have posed a true challenge. These humans are no different. Proceed with standard conquest protocol." Drex bowed his head, but something troubled him. For the first time in his career, he felt a flicker of uncertainty. Something about these humans seemed different, as he ordered his fleet toward the solar system. He couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would not follow the familiar pattern of Vorn victory. The morning Captain Lee stepped onto the bridge of the Voyager, Earth's first deep space exploration vessel. He had no idea it would become the most important day in human history. The ship had been traveling beyond the solar system for 3 months, its crew of 50 the first humans to venture so far from home. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," said Tom, the sensor operator. His eyes were fixed on the screen, brow furrowed in concentration. "There's a large object moving toward us at high speed." Lee moved to the station and studied the readings. "Natural or artificial?" "Definitely artificial, sir. And it's massive. At least 20 times our size." The bridge fell silent. Humanity had debated the existence of alien life for centuries, but no one was truly prepared for this moment. "All stations on alert," Lee ordered. "This is what we trained for. Let's not jump to conclusions." The object slowed as it approached, and soon they could see it on the main view screen. A sleek, silver vessel that seemed to shimmer against the blackness of space. Its design was unlike anything humans had imagined, with no visible engines or windows. "They're scanning us," reported Tom. "Our systems are having trouble keeping up with their technology." Lee straightened his uniform. "Open a channel using all known frequencies. Standard greeting message." Minutes passed with no response. Then suddenly, the alien ship launched 3 smaller vessels that quickly surrounded the Voyager. "They're charging weapons," shouted Tom. "Energy readings off the charts." Lee had seconds to make a decision that would affect all of humanity. Attack first and potentially start an interstellar war, or hold position and risk destruction. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered. "Deploy countermeasures, but do not fire weapons." The Voyager lurched sideways, dropping into a spinning dive that would have been impossible for a larger ship. The human vessel had been built for exploration, but its designers had included military technology just in case. The countermeasures, simple chaff and electronic jammers, weren't advanced, but they were unexpected. The alien weapons fired, but the shots went wide as the Voyager's unpredictable movement pattern and electronic interference confused their targeting systems. Aboard the Dominion, Admiral Drex watched in disbelief as the tiny human ship evaded his attack vessels with surprising agility. "Impossible," he muttered. "Their technology is primitive. They shouldn't be able to evade like that." Officer Kell studied the tactical display. "Sir, they're using very basic countermeasures, but in ways we've never seen before. And their ship's movement patterns are creative." Creative. Drex repeated the unfamiliar concept. Vorn ships moved with mathematical precision. Efficiency was everything. The human ship suddenly accelerated toward one of the Vorn attack vessels, coming so close that collision seemed inevitable before veering away at the last moment. The unexpected maneuver caused the Vorn ship to fire at empty space. "Sir," said Kell, "they're sending a message." On the Voyager, Lee had made another decision. "Send this. We come in peace, seeking friendship between our worlds. Your actions are hostile. We request communication before further misunderstanding occurs." When the message reached the Dominion, Drex was stunned. No species had ever suggested friendship during first contact with the Vorn. Conquest or surrender were the only options ever discussed. "Sir, the 2 remaining attack ships have them locked," reported a Vorn officer. "Shall we destroy them?" Drex hesitated. Standard protocol was clear. Any resistance meant immediate elimination. But these humans were different. They fought with unexpected strategies yet offered peace. They were technically inferior, but somehow effective. "Recall the attack ships," Drex ordered finally. "I want to study them further before proceeding." As the Vorn vessels pulled back, Lee and his crew breathed a collective sigh of relief. "They're retreating," Tom announced. "For now," Lee replied. "But they'll be back. Send all data to Earth immediately." He stared at the alien ship on the view screen. "Humanity just joined a much bigger universe, and our neighbors don't seem friendly." Across space, Admiral Drex was sending his own message to the Vorn High Council. First engagement with humans inconclusive. Request permission to delay conquest protocol for further assessment. This species requires special consideration. The High Council chamber was silent as Admiral Drex finished his report on the human encounter. 5 days had passed since the initial contact, and the Vorn fleet had withdrawn to a safe observation distance. During that time, they had intercepted thousands of transmissions from Earth and analyzed every aspect of human biology they could detect from afar. You claim these physically inferior beings represent a potential threat? Asked Council Leader Vex, his ancient scales dulled with age. They have no natural armor. Their lifespans are brief. Their bodies are fragile. Explain your hesitation, Admiral. Drex activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. It showed various human activities: soldiers training, scientists working, children playing. Their weakness is precisely what makes them dangerous. They evolved not as the strongest species on their planet, but as the most adaptable. He zoomed in on human military exercises. Look at how they train. They deliberately create hardship to improve themselves. They simulate failure to learn from it. This concept is alien to us. The council members shifted uncomfortably. The Vorn had been the apex species for so long that the concept of self-improvement through struggle was nearly incomprehensible to them. Most concerning is their evolutionary history, Drex continued. Unlike us, who evolved as ambush predators, humans were persistence hunters. They would chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They cannot run as fast as many species, but they can run longer. They apply this same principle to everything they do. Officer Kell stepped forward with additional data. Their historical records show constant warfare among themselves, yet they advance technologically with each conflict. They learn from defeat. When the Voyager escaped our attack vessels, they immediately adapted their strategies based on what they learned about our weapons. Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Lee stood before the newly formed United Earth Defense Council. His encounter with the alien vessel had changed everything. Nations that had been enemies for generations were now working together against a common threat. We've analyzed all data from the encounter, Lee explained. Their technology is far beyond ours, but their tactics were predictable. They expected us to either fight head-on or surrender immediately. Our evasive maneuvers confused them. General Mills, the Council's military head, nodded thoughtfully. So they're technologically superior, but tactically inflexible. That gives us something to work with. There's more, Lee continued. We've detected their observation ships at the edge of our system. They're studying us, which means they're uncertain. That uncertainty is our greatest advantage right now. Across the room, Dr. Jones, Earth's leading xenobiologist, spoke up. Our probes have gathered limited data on their biology. They appear to have evolved in a high-gravity environment with few predators. They're physically stronger than us, but they may lack our stamina and adaptability. The Council spent hours debating their next move. Some argued for developing more powerful weapons to match the aliens. Others suggested attempting diplomatic contact. In the end, they chose a two-pronged approach. Prepare for war while extending an offer of peace. Back aboard the Dominion, Drex received a surprising report. Admiral, we've detected transmissions to several neighboring star systems, Kell reported. The humans have contacted the Telari and the Mraz. Drex's scales darkened with concern. The Telari and Mraz were species conquered by the Vorn centuries ago, now living under their rule. Both provided resources and labor to the Empire, but had no real independence. How is this possible? Those systems are under our control. The humans found communication frequencies we don't monitor, Kell explained. They're bypassing our command structure and speaking directly to the subjugated populations. For the first time in his long career, Drex felt a sensation unfamiliar to most Vorn, genuine worry. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They were building alliances with conquered species. They were thinking strategically on a galactic scale despite being newcomers to interstellar travel. "The Council must understand," Drex said quietly. "These humans don't think like us. Their physical weakness forced them to become clever. Their brief lives make them work with urgency. Their history of internal conflict has prepared them for external threats." He stared at the holographic image of Earth rotating slowly before him. "The greatest error we could make is measuring them by Vorn standards. They had to earn everything they have. Nothing was given to them through natural superiority. And that, he realized, makes them more dangerous than any species we've ever encountered." The attack came without warning. 7 Vorn battle cruisers appeared near the human colony on Mars, their weapons already charging. Before Earth could respond, the colony's main dome was breached. 3,000 colonists fought for their lives as the atmosphere vented into space. "They hit us first," Commander Wilson announced to the Emergency War Council. His face was grim as satellite footage showed the devastation on Mars. Admiral Drex clearly convinced his superiors that we're a threat. The room filled with military leaders from every nation fell silent. Earth had been preparing for this possibility, but no one had expected the Vorn to strike so soon or so brutally. "What's the status of Operation Scatter?" General Mills asked. Wilson activated a secure display. "We've successfully evacuated 40% of Earth's military assets to the hidden bases throughout the asteroid belt. The stealth technology is working. The Vorn still don't know where most of our forces are." This had been humanity's first strategic decision, to avoid concentrating their defenses around Earth. Instead, they created dozens of small, hidden bases from which they could strike and retreat before the Vorn could respond. The Voyager and its sister ships, Mills pressed, all safely hidden and ready to deploy, Wilson confirmed. And the communication network with the Tellurian Mraz is secure. They're providing intelligence on Vorn fleet movements. The plan they had developed relied on humanity's greatest strength, their unpredictability. Traditional warfare against such superior technology would be suicide. Instead, they would use hit-and-run tactics, striking from unexpected directions, then disappearing before the Vorn could respond. 3 days later, Admiral Drex watched in frustration as another of his supply ships reported an attack by human vessels that seemed to appear from nowhere and vanish just as quickly. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his tactical officers. "Their ships are visible to our sensors. They shouldn't be able to hide from us." Officer Kell studied the attack pattern data. "Sir, they're not using any technology we don't understand. They're simply using known principles in ways we never considered." "Explain," Drex ordered. "They're hiding their ships inside asteroids, using the natural resources as camouflage. Our sensors detect the asteroids, but not what's inside them." Kell paused. "It's inefficient and dangerous. They risk damaging their own vessels. But it works." Drex realized the fundamental difference in their thinking. The Vorn would never consider an inefficient or risky approach. They always chose the most direct, powerful method. The humans chose effectiveness over efficiency, willing to take risks the Vorn would consider illogical. Meanwhile, Commander Wilson was aboard the Voyager, now hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid near Jupiter. His team had just returned from destroying a Vorn communication relay. "What's the latest from our allies?" he asked his communication officer. "The Tellari have begun sabotaging Vorn equipment in their shipyards," she reported. "And the Mraz are feeding false intelligence to Vorn commanders. Small actions, but they're slowing down the Empire's response." Wilson nodded. When humanity had first contacted these subjected species, they hadn't asked them to rise up in open rebellion. That would have been suicidal. Instead, they suggested small acts of resistance that individually meant little but collectively created significant disruption. Back at Vorn High Command, Drex faced the Council's anger. "You've lost 17 supply vessels and a battleship to these primitives." Council Leader Vex said coldly, "Your assessment of the human threat was correct, but your response has been inadequate." Drex stood firm. We're fighting an enemy unlike any we faced before. They don't engage directly. They strike from hiding, then retreat. They fight like the prey animals they evolved from, not like proper warriors. Then hunt them down like prey, Vex ordered. I'm sending the Grand Fleet. We will destroy their homeworld and end this. As Drex left the council chamber, he felt an unfamiliar sensation. Doubt. The Grand Fleet was the most powerful concentration of military might in the galaxy. Against any conventional enemy, it would guarantee victory. But these humans were not conventional. Later that night, as Drex studied the latest human attack patterns, he realized something that chilled him. The humans weren't just surviving. They were learning, adapting with each encounter. While the Vorn relied on their superior firepower, the humans improved their tactics with every battle. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Vorn Empire faced an enemy they couldn't simply overpower. And Drex wasn't certain they knew how to win such a conflict. The Grand Fleet of the Vorn Empire moved through space like a metallic storm cloud. 5,000 warships, each carrying enough firepower to level a city, advanced toward the Sol system. At their center was the Annihilator, a vessel so large it had never been deployed before this moment. Council leader Vex himself had taken command, determined to end the human threat personally. Admiral Drex stood on the bridge of his flagship, now just one small part of this overwhelming force. The humans have scattered their forces, he reported to Vex. Traditional planetary bombardment may destroy their homeworld, but not their military capability. Vex dismissed the concern with a wave of his armored hand. Once their homeworld burns, their resistance will collapse. All species cling to their origins. Drex wasn't convinced. In the months since first contact, humans had shown remarkable willingness to sacrifice anything except their survival as a species. They had already evacuated millions from Earth to underground colonies on Mars, Venus, and various moons, some of which the Vorn hadn't even detected yet. On the Voyager, now serving as humanity's mobile command center, Commander Wilson received reports of the approaching Armada. They've committed everything, he said to his staff, just as we hoped they would. Earth's scientists had been working day and night, reverse engineering captured Vorn technology. What they discovered had shocked everyone. The Vorn hadn't innovated in centuries. Their weapons were powerful but used principles humans had already theorized. The Vorn had simply discovered these technologies earlier in their evolution and seen no reason to improve them. Is the package ready? Wilson asked. Dr. Reed nodded. We've adapted their own shielding technology against them. The frequency disruptor should create a cascading failure across their entire fleet. Their shields will amplify the effect rather than blocking it. It was humanity's greatest gamble. Rather than trying to match Vorn firepower, they had looked for a single point of vulnerability. The Vorn shields all operated on the same frequency, an efficiency that made perfect sense to their logical minds, but created a systemic weakness no Vorn would ever consider. As the Grand Fleet approached Earth orbit, Vex opened a communication channel. Humans of Earth, his voice boomed across all frequencies. Your resistance ends today. Surrender now, and some of your species may be permitted to live as servants of the Empire. Earth responded with silence. Then, from behind moons and asteroids, from within the clouds of gas giants, hundreds of small human vessels emerged. They didn't attack. They simply positioned themselves in a sphere around the Vorn fleet. A pitiful display. Vex laughed. They think to intimidate us with these tiny ships. Drex studied the tactical display with growing unease. The pattern is too specific, he muttered. They're positioning with purpose. Before he could analyze further, Wilson gave the order. Activate the disruptor. A pulse of energy, invisible to the eye, but devastating to Vorn shields, radiated from each human ship simultaneously. When it reached the first Vorn vessels, their shields flared bright blue, and then collapsed. The pulse continued, amplified by each failing shield, crashing through the fleet like a tsunami. Aboard the Annihilator, systems failed across the ship. What's happening? Vex demanded as emergency lights flickered. "They've targeted our shield frequency," Drex realized aloud. "Every ship in the fleet is vulnerable." The human fleet didn't hesitate. They launched targeted strikes at the now defenseless command ships, including the Annihilator. Not to destroy them, but to disable their propulsion and weapons. In less than an hour, the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen was floating helplessly in space. No shields, no weapons, limited life support. Thousands of ships, millions of Vorn warriors, all neutralized without a single destroyed vessel. Wilson's voice transmitted across the fleet. "This is Commander Wilson of Earth. Your ships are disabled, but your life support remains functional. We could destroy you all now, but that's not our way. Instead, we offer terms." In the stunned silence of the Annihilator's bridge, Drex turned to Vex. In 10,000 years, no one has ever defeated a Vorn fleet. Vex's scales had turned pale with shock. How could they do this? They were primitives just months ago. "No," Drex said quietly. "They were always dangerous. We just couldn't see it because they weren't dangerous in the way we understand. They don't think like us. They never did." As Wilson's terms were transmitted to the fleet, Drex realized that the Vorn Empire had reached its breaking point, not through a grand battle of firepower, but because they had encountered a species that turned their greatest strength, their unchanging logical perfection, into their greatest weakness. The Vorn High Council chamber had never seen such chaos. Ancient council members who had lived for centuries without raising their voices now shouted over each other. The unthinkable had happened. The Grand Fleet, pride of the Empire, floated powerless in Earth's orbit, at the mercy of humans. "Execute Admiral Drex immediately," demanded Council Member Traz, his scales flaring red with rage. "His failure is complete. His assessment of the humans merely delayed our proper response." Council Leader Vex, recently returned from the humiliating defeat, slammed his fist on the table. "Drex warned us that conventional tactics would fail against these humans. We ignored him." The debate raged for hours. As it continued, Drex waited in a holding cell, expecting execution. The Vorn did not tolerate failure, and by their standards, his was absolute. When the guards came for him, he rose with dignity, prepared to face his fate. But instead of the execution chamber, they brought him to a private communication room. "You have an incoming transmission," the guard announced, clearly uncomfortable. From the human Commander Wilson. The screen activated, and Wilson's face appeared. "Admiral Drex, I'm glad they allowed this connection." Drex stood stiffly. "Have you contacted me to gloat before my execution, human?" Wilson shook his head. "To offer you asylum. Our intelligence suggests you're being blamed for the defeat. That's unjust. You are the only one who saw us clearly." Drex was stunned. In Vorn culture, enemies were destroyed, not offered protection. "Why would you do this?" "Because we need leaders who understand both sides if we're going to build peace," Wilson replied simply. "The Telari and Mraz representatives speak highly of your fair treatment of their worlds compared to other Vorn commanders." Before Drex could respond, alarms blared throughout the Vorn capital. On dozens of planets across the Empire, the unthinkable was happening. Open rebellion. Species that had been subjugated for generations were rising up, inspired by humanity's success. When Drex was hurriedly brought before the Council again, the mood had shifted from anger to fear. "The Telari have seized our shipyards in their system," reported a military officer. "The Mraz have disabled our communication network in 3 sectors. 12 other species have declared independence." Vex turned to Drex. "This was coordinated." "How?" "The humans," Drex explained. "They didn't just defeat our fleet. They'd built a coalition. While we were focusing our forces on Earth, they were connecting subjected species, sharing tactics, preparing them for this moment." On Earth, Wilson stood in the newly established Galactic Embassy, where representatives from 20 formerly subjugated species had gathered. Some attended in person, others via secure holographic connections that bypassed Vorn monitoring. Our victory means nothing if we simply replace one empire with another, Wilson told them. Humanity doesn't seek to rule. We propose a council where all species have equal voice, regardless of their technology level or military strength. The representatives, many of whom had never been allowed to speak freely before, shared their hopes and concerns. Some wanted revenge against the Vorn. Others feared the power vacuum would lead to chaos. Back on the Vorn homeworld, the Council faced a decision unlike any in their history. 4 more systems had declared independence in the last hour alone. We can't fight rebellions on 50 worlds simultaneously, Military Chief Kron admitted. Even if we recalled all our remaining forces, we lack the numbers. Vex looked at Drex. The human offered you asylum. What else did he say? That they want peace, not destruction, Drex replied. They propose a new galactic order where all species have representation. Absurd, spat Traz. Lesser species cannot govern alongside the Vorn. The lesser species are currently dismantling our empire, Drex pointed out. Perhaps our assessment of lesser needs revision. After intense debate, the Council made an unprecedented decision. They would send Drex to negotiate with the humans, not as a defeated enemy seeking terms, but as a representative exploring a new relationship. As Drex's ship prepared to depart for Earth, he received a secure message from an unknown source. When he opened it, he found detailed files. The humans had discovered corruption within the Vorn Council, secret deals that had enriched certain members while harming the Empire. Drex realized the humans were giving him leverage for the negotiations. They didn't want to destroy the Vorn. They wanted to transform them. It was a concept no Vorn had ever considered. Victory through change rather than domination. As his ship entered Earth's orbit, Drex felt something he hadn't experienced in his long life. Hope for a future different from the past. The humans had done more than defeat the Vorn in battle. They had shown them an entirely new way to exist in the universe. 1 year after the defeat of the Grand Fleet, the First Galactic Council convened in a neutral space station orbiting Jupiter. Representatives from 37 species gathered in the circular chamber, seated not by power or status, but in simple alphabetical order. The Vorn delegation, led by Admiral Drex, sat beside the Volari, a species they had once considered barely sentient. The change hadn't come easily. After Drex's initial negotiations with Earth, hardliners in the Vorn Council had attempted a last desperate military strike. It failed spectacularly when their own subjugated troops turned against them. With that final defeat, the Reform faction had taken control of the Vorn government, with Drex as their reluctant leader. Commander Wilson opened the historic session with words that would be remembered for generations. We gather not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals with different strengths. The universe is vast enough for all our differences. For many species, this was the first time they had spoken as equals to the Vorn. Some delegates could barely contain their anger at centuries of oppression. Others were simply stunned to be treated with respect. The first weeks were difficult. Ancient grudges and fresh wounds made cooperation seem impossible. Twice, delegates stormed out after heated exchanges. The Vorn representatives struggled to adapt to a system where they couldn't simply impose their will. This is inefficient, Drex complained privately to Wilson after a particularly frustrating session. 3 days of debate to establish trading rights that the Vorn could have simply decreed. Wilson smiled patiently. Efficiency isn't always the highest value, Admiral. When everyone participates in creating the rules, they're more likely to follow them willingly. This concept remained foreign to many Vorn, who had evolved in a hierarchical society where the strongest naturally commanded the rest. But slowly, Drex began to understand. The humans' physical weakness had forced them to develop cooperation, compromise, and consensus, skills the Vorn had never needed until now. 6 months into the Council's formation, the first true crisis emerged. A massive solar flare threatened a Telari colony world, and evacuation seemed impossible in the available time. In the old empire, the Vorn would have written off the loss as acceptable, but in the council chamber, something remarkable happened. The Vorn offered their fastest ships. The Mraz contributed their advanced shielding technology. Humans provided their evacuation expertise, having recently moved millions of their own people during the war. Three species that had once been enemies worked together and saved 8 million Telluri lives. After the crisis, public opinion throughout the former empire shifted. Species that had hated the Vorn for generations began to see the possibility of a different relationship. The Council's approval ratings soared across all worlds. On the anniversary of the fleet's defeat, Drex and Wilson stood in the observation dome of the station, looking out at Jupiter's swirling clouds. "You could have destroyed us," Drex said quietly. "When our fleet was disabled, you had the opportunity to eliminate the Vorn threat forever. Many of your advisors urged you to do exactly that." Wilson nodded. "Some did, but that would have made us no different from the old Vorn Empire, defining ourselves by our ability to destroy others. My people still struggle to understand your approach," Drex admitted. "Many Vorn believe strength is measured by what you can take or destroy, while we've learned that true strength often comes from what you can build or protect," Wilson replied. "Your people will learn this too with time." Below them, in the station's garden level, young representatives from a dozen species studied together at the newly established Galactic Academy. Among them were the first Vorn students to ever learn alongside other species as equals. "It will take generations to undo 10,000 years of imperial thinking," Drex observed. "Yes," Wilson agreed. "But look there, it's already beginning." A young Vorn was helping a human understand a complex physics problem, while nearby, a Tellari was teaching a Vorn student about agricultural techniques developed under resource scarcity, knowledge the abundance-rich Vorn had never needed. "We had no equals," Drex said, echoing the old Vorn belief, "until we met humans, and now we're discovering that perhaps we all have something to teach each other." Wilson smiled. "That's the greatest discovery any species can make." As they watched the students below, Drex realized that the humans' greatest victory wasn't defeating the Grand Fleet. It was showing the galaxy, including the Vorn, a better way to live among the stars. Not as conquerors and subjects, but as different peoples sharing the same vast universe, each with their own unique gifts to contribute.